Welcome to a new episode of M2M Coverage. We are here to react to the news in the NFL of the weekend. Julio Jones was traded to the Tennessee Titans. Officially, Atlanta sends Julio and a sixth-round pick to Tennessee for a second and a fourth-round pick. We knew Julio was going to be traded. We just didn't know where, and now he finally has a destination. He gets combined with A.J. Brown, Ryan Tannehill, and obviously Derrick Henry in the backfield. The Titans offense is looking pretty dynamic. So we have our panel here. Let's first introduce our new analyst, Khalin Kapoor. How are you doing, Khalin?
I am doing fantastic. Thank you for letting me in on this panel.
Yeah, no problem. And I guess we'll start with you since you're the guest. How do you feel about this trade? Do you think how far do you think the Titans have been elevated in terms of their status as contenders?
I think regarding just at least immediately, I think they have a really big increase on offense. I mean, obviously Julio is one of the most dynamic receivers in the league, and it's not that known. I guess I didn't know that until recently, but they lost this offseason. They've lost like almost 200 targets with Johnny Smith leaving, Corey Davis leaving, and Adam Humphries leaving. And Julio Jones is like those three guys are kind of fringe level guys when it comes to wide receiver talent. And then Julio Jones coming in is just ridiculous. And pairing him with AJ Brown, that's probably the biggest wide receiver duo in the league, just size wise. And so I think the Titans are really elevated offensively. And Ryan Tannehill, no matter what you say, like he can lead the offense and he can throw the ball deep when he wants to. And even with Derrick Henry, the offensive identity is going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But I think on the surface level, this is a really good addition for the Titans, obviously. And I think playoff wise, I think they're going to still be where they've been in a perennial or annual playoff contender.
Right. And another thing people have mentioned is that this team is going to have a lot of yards after the catch, given that AJ Brown is a very has a very big physical stature, and Derrick Henry obviously breaks tackles in his sleep, and Julio just adds to that equation. So next I'm going to move to Kevin. Where do you see the Titans in terms of playoff status and contender status?
Yeah, I think this easily makes them AFC South favorites. And actually, this is the best time for this to happen because in the context of the AFC South, there's a lot of turnover with the other teams. Houston Texans, they don't even know who their quarterback's going to be. Their team is the oldest roster in the league. They just keep signing random veterans. So no Deshaun Watson there. And then regarding the Colts, they got Carson Wentz, but how much do we really know about Carson Wentz? Is he really going to be good again, or was last year indicative of his actual skill set? Even if he's paired with Frank Reich again, I need some evidence that Carson Wentz is going to be good with this Colts team. So I mean, I don't think that Carson Wentz is going to make the Colts a better team over the Titans with Julio Jones. And then the Jaguars, obviously, they have a lot of promise, but I still think they're maybe 1 or 2 years off from being a playoff team. They might be a dark horse, but I really don't see it. So this makes them easy AFC South favorites. And honestly, you can compete with the Chiefs. You can compete with the Bills, especially even without a good defense. If you have an offense that has such firepower, Chiefs and the Bills, they don't have great defenses. And they've always been at the top in the AFC with the Bills last year, but the Chiefs have always been at the top. So I think Titans are really in the top 3 to 4 teams in the AFC.
Kevin says top 3 or 4 teams. Geoff A., where do you see the Titans in their division and in the AFC?
Yeah, I think this was a great move by the Titans because, they lost John Smith, they lost Corey Davis, and surprisingly, they're not anyone in the draft. So, they needed another wide receiver next to A.J. Brown, and Julio Jones is a great addition. But I still don't think they're going to be AFC South favorites because that defense still needs improvement. The defense is still one of the worst in the league, and, there's a Colts are still a great team. They have a great defense, and if Carson Wentz can pan out, if he can be 50% of what he was in his MVP season, I think the Colts have the division locked down. And the Colts are a run-heavy team. They have Jonathan Taylor, who's going to lead them, and I think the Colts are still the favorites, but Tennessee is definitely going to be a wild card team.
All right, then I'll circle back to Colin. Do you have any disagreements there? We're going to be doing our AFC South predictions later on, but Geoff A., he obviously says the Colts are the AFC South favorites. Do you think Tennessee is the AFC South favorites now that they got Julio, or do you think they need to work on their defense?
Yeah, I think that the Titans are going to be the favorites for the division. We saw the Colts. Their defense was absolutely ridiculous last year, and I mean, you see Phillip Rivers lead the team into the playoffs. Like that kind of is indicative of the entire team when Rivers is the guy leading you to the playoffs, and then you got Carson Wentz coming in, who is, we've seen him play incredibly well on the Eagles, and obviously not last year, but I think the Titans. I mean, I just think Julio Jones, AJ Brown, Derrick Henry is just so exciting, and I mean I want them to do really well just because I like Julio Jones. That's just a me thing, but I think the defense they've kind of gotten rid of a bunch of the pieces that were bad in the offseason. They're doing a complete overhauling, and so we'll see how that ends up going. But I think there's enough talent on the defense from the perspective of baseline guys. I think Kevin Byard he's still kind of locking down that defense, and I mean a lot of the guys are going to be reshuffled around, and the Colts defense is just better. That's not even a question. But I think the offensive firepower that the Titans give is just way over the top when it comes to comparing it to the Colts. So I think they're going to take the division.
Yeah, and Kevin, I just want to get your comparison directly of the Colts and the Titans and how they match up in response to kind of what Geoffrey said, him seeing the Colts at the top of the AFC South.
Well, first, who won the AFC South last year? To start off with that, it was the Tennessee Titans. And so Joffrey's going to say that the Colts have a good chance of winning the AFC South when they swapped Phillip Rivers for Carson Wentz. I mean, Joffrey's making it seem like Carson Wentz is some great quarterback. There's a lot of question marks around Carson Wentz. He sucked last year, absolutely sucked. Not a good quarterback. And you know what Titans can do with Julio Jones? It's not just what Julio Jones brings in terms of the passing game. It's in the running game. Derrick Henry last year ran for 2K yards. You know what he's going to do this year? He's going to surpass the total he had last year. Obviously, he had one extra game. But think about the box that the defense is going to have. If you have a 6-man box, 7-man box, 8-man box, you can't stack the box anymore against this Titans team with Julio Jones and A.J. Brown on the outside. Now, let me give you some stats here, courtesy of Teron Davenport, who's an ESPN Nation reporter for the Tennessee Titans. In a 6-man box, Derrick Henry has averaged 5.3 yards per rush over the past 2 years. All right? So that's what's going to happen when you do a 6-man box. If you up that to a 7-man box, A.J. Brown has averaged a league high, 4.3 receiving yards per route against a 7-man box. All right? If you do an 8-man box, Julio Jones against an 8-man box has 103 more receptions than anyone else in the NFL. 163 more receptions than anyone else in the NFL. So what are defenses going to do? Because you can't stack the box to stop Derrick Henry. Because when you do, Julio Jones and A.J. Brown will beat you deep. But then if you have a less box and have more in the secondary, Derrick Henry will destroy you. And I also want to talk about Khalin's point about just offensive identity. I think that's like an overblown argument, because just look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I mean, obviously they do have Tom Brady, the greatest football player of all time, but they put together a ragtag team of Antonio Brown, Rob Gronkowski, who was out of football for a few years, and with a limited offseason, and they won the Super Bowl. So, I mean, yeah, Titans lost their offensive coordinator, but I don't think it will be that hard to make some schemes with Julio Jones in your wide receiver core.
Geoffrey, I'm going to give you the final response.
Yeah, I agree with most of that, but I think, Carson Wentz is still an upgrade over Phillip Rivers. Phillip Rivers was an average quarterback last year. Carson Wentz was horrible, but, I think he still has a lot of potential. He has seen what he could do with a good coach like Frank Reich, with a good offensive line, and with good wide receivers, and that's what he has with the Colts. He didn't have that with the Eagles last year. The Eagles team was badly coached, and then they didn't have any wide receivers at all. They didn't have any weapons whatsoever. And, the Titans offense can be really good, but that's all contingent on, Julio Jones staying healthy. Because last year we saw that Julio Jones missed, about 8 games because of a hamstring injury. That injury can still hinder him this season. He's 32 years old, and this might be like the last part of his career. He might not be back to what he was, the last decade.
I think that the Julio Jones injury thing is overblown because he misses games here and there. But if you actually look at his games played, games started, he's played in at least 14 regular season games in a single season for 6 years in a row, with the exception of last year. So actually, Julio Jones has remarkably been pretty durable, contrary to what the media is saying about him. And I think that Julio Jones might have that nagging hamstring injury, But even with him playing like 5 to 6 games, that's so important in the AFC South because we've seen the past 2 to 3 years it coming down to the last 1 or 2 weeks. So I think that just makes the Titans clear favorites, and also Carson Wentz. You can't just blame the Eagles coaching staff and his supporting cast because Jalen Hurts outplayed him. Jalen Hurts, a rookie, all right? And Carson Wentz, also, if you just look at the way he played, he took sacks. He just threw absolutely horrible passes, terrible decision-making. So those things are on the quarterback. You can't just put all the blame on the supporting cast and the coaching staff. So I think Carson Wentz will improve with this Colts team, especially with a top 5 offensive line. But he has a lot to blame for his failures in Philadelphia.
All right, I'll leave it at that. And we will be having our fantasy morons coming soon, as well as hopefully some NFL predictions. But the NFL season is definitely heating up. There's more star power in the AFC South now. And we'll see whether the Titans or the Colts or maybe some other team. Who knows if Tim Tebow might light this division on fire. Highly unlikely. But yeah, we'll see you soon at M2M Network. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please consider subscribing to our channel, the M2M Network, for more sports and entertainment content.